Water, the one resource without which it is impossible to survive even 3 days, became inaccessible, turning into useless ice. History knows many examples when the most powerful citadels surrendered without a fight, simply because their defenders could not get to the life-giving moisture. Watch the video to the end to find out how medieval craftsmen made stones, cry water, and why deep mines became the only chance for salvation. What if I told you that everything you believed about cold is untrue when it comes to depth? Medieval engineers, unaware of the laws of thermodynamics, empirically discovered an amazing property of the Earth's crust. They noticed that the frost that froze rivers and lakes on the surface lost its power as it penetrated deeper into the Earth. This observation became the basis for the construction of wells that did not freeze even in the harshest winters. The secret was to drill the shaft below the freezing level of the soil, which in Europe is between 1 and 1.5 meters. Everything below this level was in a zone of constant positive temperature. The Earth acted as a giant thermos, preserving the heat accumulated during the summer throughout the long winter months. The craftsmen who designed the castle wells deliberately dug them much deeper than was necessary to reach the aquifer. This was done to create a large reservoir with its own microclimate, where the air always remained warm. The stone walls of the shaft also accumulated the heat of the Earth and slowly released it into the water. Thanks to this, even when a blizzard raged above, calm and above zero temperatures reigned below. The water in such wells never froze over, remaining accessible at any time. The construction of such a shaft was a titanic task, requiring many years of work and enormous resources. Bricklayers and diggers worked in a confined space, by torchlight, hollowing out the rock centimeter by centimeter. A mistake in the calculations could lead to a collapse or the shaft never reaching the water. But the result justified all the risks because such a well became the heart of the castle. It guaranteed autonomy and independence from external sources, which were unreliable in winter. Interestingly, the shape of the well shaft itself helped to retain heat at the bottom. The narrow neck prevented cold air and wind from penetrating deep inside. The warm air rising from the water created a kind of plug that prevented frost from entering. Sometimes special covered pavilions were erected over the wells, creating an additional buffer. These structures protected the water-lifting mechanism from icing and snowdrifts. Water extracted from such depths had a stable temperature of about 7 or 8 degrees Celsius all year round. In winter, it seemed warm, and in summer, pleasantly cool, which was another advantage. This stability was critically important not only for drinking, but also for technical needs. For example, such water could be used to water horses without the risk of them catching a cold, which often happened when using ice-cold water from a hole in the ice. Geothermal heat was used not only in wells, but also in basements where food supplies were stored. However, it was the water reservoirs that were the deepest and most technologically complex structures. They were designed so that the water circulated constantly without stagnating, which also prevented it from freezing. The inflow of fresh groundwater brought new heat from the bowels of the earth. In this way, the castle became a complex machine for harnessing the Earth's energy. The inhabitants of the fortress literally sat on a source of heat that saved them from death. It was a brilliant use of the laws of nature, long before the advent of physics. Understanding the properties of soil and water gave medieval man a chance to survive where it seemed impossible. It would be very interesting to hear your opinion on such ancient technologies. Do you think modern engineers could build something similar without electricity and technology? Write about it in the comments and be sure to subscribe to the channel. Are you ready to learn the truth about the most secure place in the castle? The keep, or main tower, was considered the last bastion of defense, where the lord and his family took refuge. But few people realized that this tower had to be completely self-sufficient, including its water supply. The wells inside the keep are the pinnacle of engineering madness and craftsmanship of the time. Cutting a well inside an already built tower or building a tower around a well was an incredibly difficult task. Often, such wells penetrated the entire thickness of the rock on which the castle stood, going down tens of meters. The shaft passed through all floors of the tower, with exits on each level. This allowed the defenders to draw water without going down to the basement or leaving their posts. Such a system was vital during an assault when every man counted. The walls of the keep itself served as additional insulation for the well shaft. Massive stone masonry, several meters thick, reliably protected the interior from freezing. Even if there was a severe frost outside the walls, the temperature inside the tower remained acceptable. The heat from the hearths and fireplaces that heated the living quarters also warmed the well shaft. However, the construction of such a well was fraught with enormous difficulties and risks. Workers had to chisel stone in a confined space, suffering from a lack of air. Lifting the rock to the surface required complex mechanisms and the coordinated work of dozens of people. Often, the construction of the well took longer than the construction of the tower itself. Engineers had to calculate the verticality of the shaft with perfect accuracy so that it would not deviate to the side. Any deviation could cause the well to extend beyond the foundation and weaken the structure. The water in such a well was the castle's most closely guarded treasure. Access to it was strictly controlled to prevent poisoning or sabotage. There were special mechanisms that allowed buckets of water to be lifted directly to the upper floors. These were systems of blocks and gates built into the structure of the tower itself. They made the work of the servants easier and speeded up the delivery of water to the defenders on the walls. However, this system had a significant drawback related to hygiene and odors. The well shaft, which passed through the residential floors, could become a source of dampness and mold. Engineers had to devise a ventilation system to prevent moist air from stagnating in the rooms. Sometimes such wells were also used as refrigerators, with food being lowered into them on ropes. The constant coolness at the bottom of the shaft allowed meat and butter to stay fresh longer. This was another example of the multifunctionality of medieval architecture. The well in the keep was a symbol of the castle owner's power and foresight. It showed that the fortress was ready for any challenge, whether war or natural disaster. Do you think such enormous labor costs were justified for a single source of water? Are you ready to learn a secret that will change your understanding of water extraction? Every drop that fell on the surface of the stone flowed down under the force of gravity. The stones were laid in such a way that the water was not absorbed back into the ground, but directed to the center of the structure. There it was, collected in special protected reservoirs or pipes. It was a slow but continuous process that began with each sunrise. Nature itself filled the cup of the patient man. Such structures required precise mathematical calculations and knowledge of local wind patterns for maximum efficiency. The engineer had to position the inlets so that the wind blew through the structure. The stone had to be porous enough, like a sponge, to have a large surface area for contact with the air. But at the same time, it had to be solid so that it would not be destroyed by moisture and temperature changes. Limestone or volcanic rock was usually used. Inside such a stone pyramid, complex labyrinths were created for free air circulation. The air had to pass slowly in order to release moisture, but not stagnate. It was a complex aerodynamic machine with no moving parts. It worked for centuries without requiring repair or fuel. In medieval castles, this technology was adapted to suit their needs, using massive fortress walls and towers. The thick walls kept the cold in perfectly, which was necessary for the condensation process. Special niches or ventilation shafts created ideal conditions for active condensation. Moisture flowed down thin gutters carved directly into the stone and filled underground cisterns drop by drop. Builders turned the fortress itself into a source of water. Of course, such a passive method could not provide water for a huge garrison or water 100 horses. The productivity of the air well was limited and depended on the weather. But in a critical situation, when the main sources had been poisoned or captured by the enemy, every drop counted. This purest water was used to fill drinking flasks for the weakest or for commanders. It was a strategic reserve of last resort. Engineers designed the interior of the castle so that moist air from the deep cellars rose upward. Passing through cold slabs and channels in the walls, it inevitably settled in the form of droplets. It was a kind of passive water collection system that worked around the clock and was invisible to the eye. It only required periodic cleaning of the gutters from dust and cobwebs to keep the water flowing freely. In some ancient castles, archaeologists found strange vertical shafts that did not reach the water. For a long time, historians believed that these were simply unfinished wells. abandoned due to a mistake by surveyors. There were also theories that it was a clever ventilation system. However, modern research suggests that these may have been moisture condensers. The mystery has found its logical explanation. The walls of these shafts were deliberately laid with rough, uncut stone with many protrusions. This was done to maximize the condensation area in order to capture as much air as possible. At the bottom, a sealed water collector was installed with waterproofing made of fatty clay or sheet lead. This allowed dozens of liters of water to be collected per day from practically nothing, just from emptiness. Such water was completely safe and sterile, as it did not come into contact with soil or bacteria. It was soft, without the taste of salt or swamp mud, unlike well water. It was highly valued and often used by doctors to prepare medicinal decoctions and wash wounds. Alchemists considered such water to be especially pure and suitable for experiments. The knowledge of how to extract water from the air was passed down from generation to generation as a great secret. This required not so much tools as an understanding of the laws of nature. The masters knew how to read the stone and the wind, creating their invisible rivers. Unfortunately, with the advent of water pipes, these subtle skills were lost. This forgotten technology demonstrates the incredible observation and ingenuity of our ancestors. They did not fight nature, but used its forces, finding resources where modern man would see only dry stone. We often underestimate the intelligence of people from the past, considering them primitive, but their solutions were ingeniously simple. Don't forget to like this if you were surprised by this ancient technology. Stagnant water could quickly turn into a bacteriological poison capable of killing the garrison in a week. Therefore, purification systems were integrated into the architecture of the fortress from the outset. Engineers understood that water quality directly affected the combat effectiveness of soldiers. Medieval craftsmen used multi-stage filtration with readily available natural materials. Charcoal, clean river sand, gravel, and dense fabric were used to create barriers to dirt. Charcoal excelled at absorbing unpleasant odors and harmful substances, functioning like a modern absorbent. Water was passed through these layers before it entered the main storage tank or bucket. These filters had to be changed regularly, which was a dirty job. Particular attention was paid to the physical protection of sources from deliberate poisoning by enemy saboteurs or internal traitors. Well heads and cistern hatches were always locked with powerful locks or closed with heavy grates. The keys to these locks were kept only by the commandant or personally by the lord of the castle. Access to water was guarded around the clock by armed guards, who were forbidden to be distracted. It was impossible to approach the well without permission. If there was the slightest suspicion that the water was contaminated, simple but proven methods of testing were used. A silver coin or silver object could be placed in a bucket of water for a while. It was believed that the darkening of silver was a sure sign of the presence of poisons, although this did not work for all toxins. Dogs, whose sense of smell was keener than that of humans, were also given the water to smell. For additional disinfection of suspicious water, a small amount of wine or vinegar was used. Alcohol and acid killed some of the disease-causing bacteria and made the stale water more palatable. This was standard practice even for Roman legionnaires, which was successfully adopted by medieval warriors. Drinking clean water in those days was generally considered a risky business, so they always tried to dilute it. Expensive copper and silver vessels were also used for long-term storage of a lord's drinking supplies. The ions of these noble metals have proven bactericidal properties, which were known even to ancient doctors. Water in such a jug could be stored for weeks without spoiling or acquiring a swampy smell. Ordinary soldiers, of course, had to make do with wooden barrels and clay jugs. In the event of an active siege, when the risk of sabotage increased many times over, control was tightened twice as much. Before giving water to people, it was first tasted by animals or captured enemies. Only if nothing happened to the taster after an hour was the garrison allowed to drink the water. Cruel times called for cruel and uncompromising precautions. No one was going to risk the lives of the entire army for the sake of humanism. The cleanliness of the well depended directly on the cleanliness of the bucket and the lifting rope. It was strictly forbidden to use dirty dishes brought from the stable or to lower foreign objects into the well. The rope could not be placed on dirty ground. Special boxes or hooks were made for it. Violation of these sanitary rules was severely punished. up to and including public corporal punishment at the pillory. The castle's water supply system was not just a set of engineering pipes and dug pits, but a guarded strategic facility of the utmost importance. Loss of control over the water meant the inevitable surrender of the fortress to the enemy within a few days. Water security was synonymous with the security of the entire fortress. It would seem that in winter there is plenty of water in the form of endless drifts of snow and ice, but using it was deadly dangerous. Many inexperienced commanders considered snow to be a salvation, but quickly became convinced of the opposite. Melting snow required a huge amount of fuel, since snow is mostly air. To get a pot of water, you had to melt a whole mountain of snow. In a besieged castle, firewood was in short supply and valued more than gold. Firewood was saved for heating people and cooking food, not for melting water. In addition, snow water contains virtually no salts and minerals necessary for humans. It is essentially distilled water, which does not quench thirst but only deceives the body. Prolonged consumption of such water led to the leaching of beneficial salts from the body, weakness, and heart problems. Soldiers grew weak before our eyes, lost their combat effectiveness, and became lethargic. They became easy prey for disease and could not hold their weapons. The snow was often dirty, especially in the castle courtyard, where people and animals constantly walked. The whiteness of the snowdrifts was deceptive, hiding dust, soot, and waste products. Along with the snow, sewage, manure, and dangerous bacteria got into the cauldron. This threatened outbreaks of terrible dysentery, which spread instantly in a confined space. The disease mowed down garrisons faster and more effectively than enemy swords and arrows. Ice from a moat or river was also an unreliable and dangerous source of moisture. To obtain it, it was necessary to cut holes in the ice, which quickly froze over in the cold. The holes had to be constantly maintained, and going out onto the open ice made the water carriers an excellent target for enemy archers. In addition, the water in the moats was often stagnant, dirty, and used as a sewer. One could only drink it out of complete desperation. If they had to melt snow due to the lack of other sources, they tried to collect only the clean layer. They took freshly fallen snow from roofs or the upper platforms of towers where no human foot had ever trodden. It was tightly packed into barrels and brought into warm living quarters to melt slowly. This allowed them to save precious firewood by using the existing heat in the rooms. The process was long, but more economical. Sometimes melted snow was mixed with wine, vinegar, or beer to compensate for the lack of minerals and improve the taste. Alcohol and additives made this liquid more like a normal drink and killed some of the bacteria. But only wealthy lords and officers with personal supplies could afford this. Ordinary soldiers often suffered from dehydration and intestinal disorders, even when surrounded by snowdrifts. Medical treatises of the time strictly warned against the dangers of drinking cold water from snow. Doctors, based on generations of experience, advised boiling such water before drinking. They also recommended adding medicinal herbs, roots, or even wood ash to it. It was a primitive but effective attempt to mineralize and disinfect empty water. Preparing ice for glaciers was a separate, important economic task, but it had other purposes. This ice was used exclusively for storing perishable foods, meat, and fish, not for drinking. Ice blocks were cut from the river in large cubes and stored in deep stone cellars. There, they were covered with straw and sawdust for insulation so that the ice would last until summer. The realization that snow is not a complete substitute for water came to people through the bitter experience of loss. History knows many examples when entire fortresses surrendered, not because of hunger, but because of diseases caused by poor water. Many garrisons paid with their lives for the presumptuous attempt to spend the winter on meltwater without sufficient supplies of fuel and food. Nature did not forgive ignorance of its laws. The struggle with thirst in winter was a paradoxical and psychologically difficult situation. There was plenty of water around, an entire ocean in a solid state, but it was impossible to take it and drink it. This required strict discipline from commanders and the competent distribution of scarce resources. The water carriers were among the most enduring and strongest people in the fortress. Their work resembled hard labor. Hundreds of times a day, they had to lift full buckets from the depths of the courtyard to the upper floors of the keep. They had to carry heavy loads up steep spiral staircases, often icy and treacherously slippery. The railings were cold and the steps narrow, making every step risky. One fall could not only cripple a person, but also leave the defenders of the tower without water for the whole day. There were strict water consumption rules for each rank, and violations were severely punished. The lord and his family received the cleanest, freshest well water first. This was not only a matter of prestige, but also of safety, to avoid poisoning or disease. Soldiers and servants were given water from storage tanks, which could be kept there for weeks. Animals got what was left at the bottom, or technical water after washing and mopping the floors. On frosty days, working at the well was particularly hellish and required tremendous willpower. Wet ropes instantly froze in the wind and became as stiff as steel wire. They tore the skin off the hands until they bled, turning every bucket lift into torture. The gate mechanisms creaked and constantly jammed in the cold, requiring regular lubrication with animal fat. The servants had to warm the parts with their own breath or torches. To prevent the water from freezing in the buckets when carried across the open courtyard, they were covered with wooden lids. The containers were additionally wrapped in woolen cloth or straw to provide thermal insulation. The water carriers literally ran to deliver the precious liquid warm to its destination. If the water had time to freeze over, it had to be reheated, wasting precious firewood. It was an endless relay race for survival. Special attention and care were given to war horses, which were the main striking force of the knights. A good destrier cost a fortune, often more than the rider's equipment, and its loss was a real tragedy. Ice-cold water could cause colic and death in a heated horse, so their drinking water was prepared with great care. Water was specially heated for them by throwing hot stones from the fire into stone troughs. During a siege, discipline regarding water resources became ironclad and merciless. The garrison commander took personal control of all sources and keys to the cisterns. It was human fortitude and self-sacrifice that made all these complex engineering systems work. Without the daily heroism of ordinary people, even the thickest walls would have been nothing more than a cold tomb. Stones could protect against wind and arrows, but only people could bring the castle to life. Which of these ancient survival technologies do you think would be useful to us in the event of a global cataclysm? Perhaps in the context of an energy crisis, these old blueprints will one day save us. Suggest topics for future videos in the comments. What other secret technologies of the past would you like to learn about? And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on new dives into history.